Good morning, everyone, for the ones that joined the latest. Very happy to see you here today. I will have Frank start with the introduction of this presentation, explain why we chose this topic, and then Toufic will continue. And at the end, we have an open discussion with all of you in order to have a strategic reflection of what's going on and how we can best tackle the situation. So, Frank, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Tiziana, and good morning, good afternoon to everybody. As Tiziana said, we wanted to take a moment to reflect, of course, on the current situation, which is being described by the IEA, Fatih Birol, as the largest energy crisis in the history. So it's certainly something that, of course, affects us all. And, we decided to try to see a little bit, what it means for us. We will have a short presentation, and at the end, we would like to suggest some recommendations, and then, we'd like to also hear your feedback about it. So we have a presentation that's in two parts. One is a little bit an analysis, and Toufic, who has done the bulk of the work on it, will go over that, and then towards the end, some of the recommendations that we would like to discuss with you, I will do, and then of course we'll hear your feedback. And maybe just to frame it a little bit, obviously we have, let's say, the countries that are directly and currently still impacted by the war situation. And then there is, the North African side of things, where, we have perhaps maybe, if you would like to call it, secondary effects. And we decided to focus on those countries, did a brief analysis on what it means. But then, of course, the recommendations are universal. That even goes beyond, let's say, the Middle East, North Africa, the Gulf, and Europe. Some of them, although of course we focus on our neck of the woods, our part of the world. And with that, I would like to give the floor to Toufic to start the presentation.
Yeah. Thank you, Frank. Thank you all for joining us to our network's fifth pit stop meeting under the name of From Crisis to Transition, Rethinking Energy in the Mediterranean. So as Frank mentioned, we'll be presenting to you the findings of the white paper that has the same title that we've been working on for the past 2 weeks, and move on to some recommendations. So before I dive deep into the presentation, I would like to start with this key message, which is that this crisis that we're going through did not simply expose short-term vulnerabilities. However, it revealed structural weaknesses in our energy systems built around distant supply routes, maritime checkpoints, and concentrated production. And hence, the central argument here is not about emergency management, but moving or decisively moving from crisis management to a permanent energy security and energy transition architecture that are to be designed and built together for the Mediterranean and for the whole globe. And moreover, the Mediterranean, with its northern and southern neighborhoods, must be approached as one integrated energy and industrial system if we are to move from short-term crisis response to long-lasting resilience. So, unfortunately, as we have learned in the past few weeks by witnessing it, firsthand, that the Strait of Hormuz is the most critical energy transit checkpoint in the global system. So under normal conditions, it handles 20 to 27% of global seaborne crude oil and around 20% of liquid natural gas trade. So what makes this crisis different, this current one different, is that it's not only the volume that was disrupted, but the nature of the disruption. And here I mean how and why the flows were disrupted. So tankers or tanker traffic fell to almost zero, not only because of the physical threats, but because of insurance or maritime war risk insurance that was withdrawn. So even if the ports and facilities remain intact, without insurance, tankers and vessels cannot operate and move. So some Gulf producers like Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates were able to divert limited volumes of oil through bypass pipelines, but these quantities or volumes were not able to cover more than 25% of the normal flow. And however, LNG exports do not have this comparable alternative, and the volumes of LNG were largely curtailed. So within days of the disruption, oil prices surged up to $100 to $120 US dollars per barrel, as opposed to $80 to $90 US dollars per barrel prior to the disruption. While LNG markets experienced extreme volatility, where in the EU and Asian benchmark prices, they increased by 30 to 50%. So now in this slide, you can see this schematic curve, which shows us that the most severe effects of the Strait's closure have not yet fully materialized. And based on this model, we can see that the shock transmission is expected to go through 3 phases. So phase 1 is the illusion of stability, where the initial shock is masked by countries drawing down on their onshore inventories and already en route cargoes and vessels that have already, embarked prior to the escalation and prior to the disruption. So phase 2 is the supply vacuum, where the floating storage has been fully depleted, and replacement cargoes from secondary producers either fail to arrive or take longer time to arrive, and not with sufficient volumes needed. And phase 3, so now we're in week 7, we're approaching phase 3 soon. So this is the structural deficit phase, where material supply tightness locks in and the worst economic and energy impacts start to materialize. Moreover, in this figure, we can also see clearly the delayed market and economic impact. And this is a figure or a map that illustrates how global oil flows would respond under a Strait of Hormuz disruption scenario that was developed by JP Morgan based on Kepler shipping data. So if you look at the map, and in particular on Europe, you can see here that it says that most deliverables stop by April 10. This means that ships or vessels that were already en route before this disruption would still arrive, but after this date, no new cargoes are reaching the EU from the Persian Gulf because no new tankers are leaving, or they have been delayed due to the crisis. And once again, this highlights an important point about the nature of this disruption, that the impact is not immediate everywhere, and it propagates over time depending on the distance from the source. So the farther the country or the countries are from the source, which in this case is the Persian Gulf, the longer it takes them to feel the impact or the immediate effect of this crisis. So we have seen now the impact of the crisis on the oil and gas, but it doesn't stop here. There are impacts from industrial byproducts that we get from hydrocarbon processing. And here I'm talking about helium and sulfur. So helium comes mainly from natural gas processing, which Qatar produces 30 to 35% of global helium supply. And since the LNG facilities were attacked and operations were suspended, so most or a substantial part of this global share, we're talking about 30 to 35%, has been removed in terms of availability for the global market. And helium is important and essential in several things such as semiconductor manufacturing, medical imaging, and advanced electronics. The second byproduct is sulfur, which is recovered usually during oil refining and gas processing. And it's used primarily to produce sulfuric acid for phosphate fertilizers, as well as metal processing, and it's used in the battery supply chains. So all these have been affected as UAE, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia rank among the world leaders in sulfur exports, and all their exports pass through the Strait of Hormuz. So the impacts of this crisis they also have disrupted the fertilizer supply chain, which are directly linked to hydrocarbon production. And this directly feeds into the food supply chain and affects the food prices and the agricultural output. So nitrogen-based fertilizers such as ammonia and urea are mostly produced. They're mostly produced today from natural gas, and these two have been particularly exposed today with this crisis. So, exporters of ammonia and urea are mainly Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Bahrain, Iran, and Iraq. And they constitute around 15% of the global ammonia trade and around 20 to 21% of the global urea trade. And around 1/3 of the global seaborne fertilizer trade. So we're talking about 30% of global seaborne fertilizer trade that passes or depends on the Strait of Hormuz. For aviation, obviously there has been an impact as well. So higher jet fuel prices and tighter availability of refined products have directly increased operating costs for airlines, and the constrained supplies of sustainable aviation fuel feedstocks have added pressure. Especially at a time when blending mandates are expanding. Now for a regional perspective, so looking at the Mediterranean region, both the northern and southern neighborhood, they both form a highly interconnected energy and energy commodity system. While production profiles differ drastically or sharply across the region, they all remain structurally exposed to maritime corridors linking the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea. So under normal conditions, oil, LNG, fertilizers, sulfur, and other commodities would transit from the Persian Gulf through the Strait of Hormuz, through Bab el-Mandeb, all the way up to the Suez Canal, and into the Mediterranean Sea and to the northern and southern Mediterranean. So when the disruption occurred now at the point of origin, which is the Strait of Hormuz, the effects propagate across both the northern and Mediterranean shores. And as we mentioned earlier, the impacts initially are price-based, but later on physical shortages intensify and will intensify and have already done so due to the persistence of the disruptions. Now to focus a little bit more on the EU. So So for the EU, impact unfolded in phases, and this is due to high gas storage levels that the EU has, and diversified supply routes. So this delayed immediate shortages, but price volatility, I mean, it re-emerged quickly, and this contributed to renewed inflationary pressure. And I mean, moreover, the LNG markets tightened as Europe competed more aggressively with Asian buyers for LNG cargoes. Moreover, we have disruptions to fertilizers, helium, and aviation fuel supply chains, which also increased costs across agriculture, healthcare, and the transport sectors. Now, I mean, post-2022 measures, and here I'm talking about the Russian-Ukrainian war, I mean, measures have strengthened, these measures that the EU took have strengthened their resilience, but I mean, they have not fully eliminated exposure to global price shocks and distant choke points, such as the one that we are going through now. And in the Southern Mediterranean, as Frank mentioned, the white paper that we worked on focuses on the MED-GEM partner countries that are experiencing secondary systemic impacts and not direct military conflict. And here, in these countries, shock is transmitted primarily through prices, trade disruption, and availability of industrial inputs and feedstock. So countries in North Africa, I mean, they differ significantly in exposure depending on their energy balances, if they're importers or exporters, depending on their, their fiscal status as well as their existing infrastructure. I can go very briefly, I mean, country by country. So if we see Algeria is mainly a oil and gas exporter with a gas pipeline to Europe. It also exports fertilizers. So, I mean, the impact of the war was mostly positive, I mean, on its economy. So you had higher exports to the EU and in terms of mitigation measures, they maximize their exports and I mean, they maintained subsidies for domestic stability. For Egypt, which has a hybrid energy system, but recently, in the recent years, it has become more of an LNG importer. So it mainly imports natural gas. However, it exports fertilizers. The impact of the war on it was overall negative. I mean, higher import costs, especially when it comes to LNG. I mean, mitigation measures that were taken, such as prioritizing fuel imports and subsidizing bread and food. And I mean, they do rely on external financial support. Morocco is an import or has an import-dependent energy system. And it relies heavily on sulfur imports for its phosphate fertilizers and in turn its fertilizer exports. So the impact was overall negative. There was a surge in affected globally, but I mean it affected Morocco's economy in particular. There was oil price surges and sulfur supply disruptions. So, I mean, the initial response and mitigation measures taken by Morocco were to diversify its sulfur imports. So it looked for other or for non-Gulf suppliers. It also has some long-term strategies, such as looking into renewable energy expansions and green ammonia initiatives. But I mean, these cannot be materialized on the short term. As for Tunisia, it's mostly import dependent. It relies heavily on Algerian gas, and it has somehow a weakened phosphate sector today. The impact of the war was obviously negative, higher import costs on it, inflation, as well as financial strain. Initial responses, import restrictions, subsidies, like short-term containment to the implications of the crisis. And before moving on to the recommendations section, which Frank will be, presenting and having discussions with you about this, this slide brings us back to the central message at the very beginning, which is more of a clear lesson learned from this current crisis, which is that energy security and energy transition can no longer move separately. They must be designed and built together, so that we're able to transition from an energy system that is extractive, choke point dependent, geopolitically fragile, and relies on distant supply routes, to an energy system that is renewable, geographically distributed, interdependent, and relies on nearshored value chains. So that's it from my side related to the analysis at a global level, with some regional perspective and some country-by-country analysis. Frank, the floor is yours.
And you.
Yes, thank you, Toufic. What we then tried to do was distill some, learnings from the current situation that obviously go beyond, managing an immediate crisis. So these are, some thoughts that we would like to share with you, but we were really open for any suggestions, additions, modifications. But I think if we're looking at the current immediate concern to save energy, I was in Egypt 2 weeks ago, and the malls close early, public lighting is curtailed, and we see that obviously in many countries all over the world. That's an immediate thing to save energy at the time. That is a no-brainer. So I think there is a lot of merit in trying to solidify that a little bit more, and just go beyond like the immediate supply shortages, but lock it in a little bit more permanently. There's no downside to energy efficiency. Energy that you're not using doesn't need to be produced or shipped or whatever, and it doesn't. And very often, it's a simple thing to do. You just manage your lighting, your air conditioning, your heating a little bit better. But very often there is regulatory hurdles that need to be managed. One of the things is that a lot of people live in rental houses. Now, energy saving measures are done by the owner of the house, but then the benefits go to the tenants. So those kinds of things need some unlocking and made more permanent. So I think that's a no-brainer, but still needs some attention. Part of that, a subset of that, is more rapid electrification, and the simple benefit of that is by nature more efficient. An electric vehicle, for example, loses a lot less energy than an internal combustion engine, which is basically a furnace on wheels that also drives a little bit. But basically, you're heating the environment with an explosion inside an engine. So it's very inefficient. Obviously, an electric vehicle, even taking into account all the losses in the electricity generation and transmission and distribution, is more efficient. So electrification is certainly something that is part of this equation. We do think that we need to work on acceleration of renewables because not just because they're cost effective and because they reduce emissions, but now more and more so because they're indigenous. So they're inherently more secure than than obviously traded energy over longer distances. Even though you will still trade, etc. But I think it makes sense to maximize whatever you can do inside your country. That is, I think, clear. There is an IRENA target that was actually, I think, agreed on at one of the COPs. I think it was COP 28. Tripling of renewable energy capacity by 2030. We're lagging behind that. So why don't we give that an extra boost and make it non-negotiable? One of the things that we've been looking at also from a renewable molecule perspective is strategic reserves. I mean, we've seen them in action. We are seeing them in action. At the same time, we haven't seen the same kind of momentum behind the cleaner molecules. And there is no reason why you shouldn't have strategic reserves for green ammonia or even green hydrogen in salt caverns, etc. So once we make the shift, and we will make the shift to cleaner molecules, we should also think about strategic reserves for those, and they can be in every country. In terms of infrastructure and integration, the connecting infrastructure. Toufic showed a picture about electricity connections, pipelines, etc. We need to expand those, and even though you might think, well, then we're dependent on other countries. If you have a wider net of interconnecting infrastructure, that is an inherently more secure system. Because we will keep trading energy, but we have a lot more optionality with renewables. Because if we look at our region, everybody can make very cost-effective green molecules, and the more interconnection we have, the more secure the system becomes. Then, in terms of planning, I do think that it requires a more integrated approach, especially if you're looking at connecting infrastructure, connecting markets, etc. So a centralized planning idea, if you will, would have a lot of merit. And then, in terms of how to then actually get the markets going, we do think that we can work on alliances that are perhaps a little bit more binding than some that we see right now. And maybe there could be, let's say, a Mediterranean master plan for energy where we have, trade as an important element of that. And then the last one, nearshoring. This is something that is also part of the Pact for the Mediterranean and the TMET initiative, whereby we also support local economies by making the tech, because basically renewable energy is all technology based. It's not extractive. It's not mining. And that is something that everybody can do. And obviously, Europe has an advantage. There's a lot more tech development, but then the actual production and industrial development of this could be, of course, in the neighboring countries. That is to the benefit of everybody. So these are some of the thoughts that we are presenting with you today. I would like to get your feedback. Now, we've been working on what we like to call the missing middle, and that is, the lack of appropriate skills. Of course, we have a lot of skilled people in every country, but if you take a closer look, then obviously we do require new skills, and we can have reskilling, upskilling, and skilling per se, and that is something that needs a lot of focus, because delivering capacity is a binding constraint. Without good people on the ground, it's difficult to deliver on anything. So that's an important aspect that we've been working on. Next.
And you.
This is a little bit, who we are, what we do. Of course, we were supported financially by the European Commission. We work on policy, infrastructure, manufacturing, finance, and skills, and everything towards a resilient southern Mediterranean energy system that's well connected internally, but of course also with the European Union. The region has assets and ambition, a lot of potential, but yeah, we need to make some more effort in getting it up to speed and up to scale, and that's why we are here to find those elements where we can work together and make this a reality. And this is again a quick recap of the things that we've been doing. We've been working on capacity building, on a lot of work we've done on renewable hydrogen certification. The CBAM help desk has been helpful in getting a better understanding. And now we're at the start of the TMED investment platform, and we're ready to support that together with you. And part of that will be around getting investments going in technology and nearshoring of these equipments.
And you.
I think this is the last slide. And of course, we're currently in a crisis. Nobody knows what's going to happen. But we do think that this is not something that will go back to the way it was 2 months ago, and it does require different thinking. But I also think that what we have been doing in the last couple of years, we just need to reinforce that. There's nothing that we have done that doesn't make sense in the new world order, if you will. It's actually something that is more relevant than ever. And again, we're happy and ready to support you in whatever way is required.
And you.
Now I really think that's the end of the presentation. So the floor is open. We'd really like to hear your feedback, your concerns. Do you agree? Don't you agree? Ali, go ahead.
Yes, thank you for this amazing presentation. I really support you. Actually, I finished policy brief paper on this topic exactly, but for Egypt, not for the whole region. And I have reached similar conclusion, except I have some caveats. For example, Egypt is affected not by the closure of Strait of Hormuz. It's mainly by natural gas supply disruption from the pipeline from Mediterranean Sea. So in Egypt, if this supply is going well, no interruption, we will face the problem of Strait of Hormuz only in summer because we have peak in summer. For renewable energy, I also in my paper said about this, but we will have difficulty in achieving this. In Egypt, we have very good resources in wind and solar, and they want to reach 42% by 2030. But this is very hard to achieve because of flexibility and grid flexibility. For example, if you achieve this, there is a moment where we will have 90% of electricity covered by wind and solar only, and you have to have a great flexibility. Also, there is a moment we will have zero supply of this. 50%, 30% of time, this renewable will cover more than 50% of load. So in any case, we need flexible grids, and we don't have this in Egypt. I think it will be the same case for all Southern Mediterranean. So this is something to work on. Also, when I analyze the solution based on economics feasibility or economic ability and energy security, if we applied a lot of renewable, we will have different sort of energy security, which is, let me give an example in Egypt. We started Benban, which is 1.4 gigawatt in approximately 2016. So 10 years from now, 1.4 gigawatt will vanish from the grid. And that's an issue in energy security because we don't manufacture this this solar panel, and that's like we can be affected by supply chain disruption. We can be affected by price increase because of, and actually I think Europe, for example, have industry act that try to solve this in United States, Section 45X of the Inflation Reduction Act. Also in India, we have production-linked incentive. We have in Turkey, we have several cases like this. But I think in Mediterranean, in our parts of Mediterranean, we don't see this yet, although it's approaching. But we don't see it. That's but I totally agree with your conclusion.
And you.
No, thank you. I mean, you're of course absolutely right that you need flexibility. The more renewables you have, you need to fill the gaps because the sun never shines at night and the wind doesn't always blow. So that's very clear. But we also see, of course, massive battery capacity coming online. As you know, you were in Abu Dhabi in January, the Mazda project, which is basically base load flat 1 gigawatts based on solar and a massive battery capacity, which are becoming more and more affordable. But it's absolutely true what you're saying, and also interconnection helps. That is actually also something that provides additional flexibility because you can, basically lend from your neighbors, especially east-west when you have, of course, the evening peak that, travels across North Africa. The better interconnected you would be, you could also, carry some of that burden across the border. Thank you. Any other feedback or reflection? We'd love to hear from you.
And you.
Ali.
And you.
Yeah, thank you, Toufic and Frank, for your presentation. We have the same situation as Morocco, maybe Jordan. The dependence of energy user in Tunisia it's very huge now. It's about 62%. And we depend from Gulf country for raffinate, for gasoline, for essence. We import that from Saudi Arabia, and we import also from Kuwait and Qatar ammonia and sulfur for our and chemistry industry. For phosphate, you need to produce acid sulfuric to produce acid phosphoric, and it should be a problem. But the main energy, it's natural gas from Algeria. We have pipeline. Transmed is the transmission gazoduc for Europe, and the impact is not immediately, is coming in next summer, because we have contract with hedging, and we have average price we pay today, last average price last 6 months in end of last year. Now we have not impact, but we must to pay after July the average price for this semester is 60 or 70% more, and the deficit of the balance is very huge in Tunisia. It's about 12 billion Tunisian dinar. It's about $4 billion US. Next summer, it's become very huge. We upgrade more than 50%. And the government, they take this crisis to have many high-level meeting with the parliament and the government to accelerate renewable energy, to use massive base storage, and to accelerate the project of pumping system, many level, plusieurs leviers, and also to accelerate hybrid and electric car use charged by solar, because our transport, it's the big consumer in Tunisia. It's about more or less 40%. And also in residential sector. And myself, I do meeting, very high level meeting with the Bavarian, German government at the embassy. We discuss about crisis, and I propose green hydrogen like alternative, also storage. Thank you. It's good analysis, Mark and Toufic.
Frank, thank you, Ali, and also good to hear that your government is trying to push for some of these things that are also part of our recommendations. Thank you for that, Joseph.
And you.
Hello, thank you everyone for the presentations. Thank you Toufic for the panorama of the region, and thank you, Frank, for the recommendations. What I wanted to highlight that, yes, energy security is the hot topic today. What we're trying to do in Lebanon is solve it bottom up. So try to find solution for each institution and then build on those in order to be able to flip the pyramid, if you want, of energy consumption, because we are still an energy importer and we are not yet an energy producer. On the other side, it's very interesting what we're seeing today. So if you want, the renewing of the discussion on energy security is eating even more and more from the importance of energy efficiency. So with all that hype around renewable energy and solar and wind, yes, they have always been more attractive and more sexier, let's say, than energy efficiency, but we should always be reminding that the cleanest energy and the safest energy that we can produce is the energy that we do not consume. So I just wanted to highlight that aspect. In Lebanon, we're trying to refocus a little bit more about energy efficiency, because people were a little bit more careful about their energy consumption during a certain period because of rarity of electricity. Now, since you have solar, you can turn on the AC all day long. So that's not the main idea. We should always be coupling renewables with energy efficiency and focusing on that. That's only what I wanted to say. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, everyone.
And you.
Oh, that's thank you for that. I couldn't agree more. The cleanest and safest and most secure energy is the one that you don't need. Well said.
And you.
Anybody else would like to share something with us, Mandali?
And you.
Yes. So to mention the example of Jordan, during this supply disruption, the natural drive, worldwide has been diversification of the supply. Unfortunately, in Jordan, it seems this diversification is being focused on the finding more natural gas and also relying more on oil shale. So we have a oil shale plant that is producing 15% of Jordan's electricity, and they aim to expand it. And as you know, these two sources are fossil fuels. And I guess the reason for this transition, and instead of going towards renewable energy, is the problem of energy storage. So, for example, the project you mentioned, Frank, in the Emirates, I think it's one of the world's first on this scale. So it seems that until this technology matures and spreads to other countries, I think energy storage will continue to be some sort of a bottleneck.
And you.
Yeah, thanks. I mean,
And you.
actually, I mean, if you're looking at the growth of storage, I mean, obviously the Middle East is one area, but if you're looking at what's happening in China, but it's everywhere. I mean, this is not, it's not unproven technology. It's not something. Of course, the scale of the Abu Dhabi project is unprecedented, but. I would still think. I mean, I did look at the oil shale cost. I mean, it's super expensive. I mean, Jordan has so many more cost-effective options. I would even argue that making green hydrogen, turning that back into electricity, would be cheaper than the oil shale. So yeah, double down on renewables and on storage before you start doing other things would be my recommendation.
It seems that they haven't chosen that option yet for whatever reason.
Good. Anybody else? If not, then we would also basically like your feedback in written form. So what we will do is we'll finalize the write-up of what you've seen today. It will be a document, and then of course we're happy to receive any feedback. And if you agree, of course, we would love you to share it with as broad an audience as we can have. So that will happen. I'm looking at Toufic. How much time do we need, you think?
I mean, it's complete. We'll just because it wouldn't look sexy if Raya does not put her final touch on it. So she's doing the final formatting and design of the document, and we're ready to publish it.
Then with that, I would like to thank everybody for joining us today. Of course, we hope that the current crisis finds some sort of solution sooner rather than later in all the countries, not just Iran, of course, also Lebanon, Syria, etc., etc. So stay safe and speak soon. Thank you very much.
Before we close, just an important information. Before everyone leaves, the next steering committee will take place online in June. So that's important for you to know. For practical reasons, the volatility in the region makes it very difficult for us to organize, and for other reasons as well. But we'll be happy to gather online this time, and then again on site, hopefully. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.